Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown.
And I am Matthew Stockton.
Yes, you are. You're also Matthew Stockton of another podcast that has just released on Spotify called
Too Old or Pure Gold. So type in on Spotify, Too Old or Pure Gold.
Does it have to do with like the quality of your pee when you're an old man? Or?
No. So I'll just read the blurb, where Gen X nostalgia meets fresh perspectives from millennials and Gen Z. So essentially, Olin and I, the two Gen Xers, we get millennials and Gen Zers to watch 80s movies that we loved, and then we talk about them and talk about if they're too old or pure gold.
And you were saying that Olin has a particularly interesting favorite actor.
Oh, okay. Don't make this stop you from going to the Too Old or Pure Gold movie podcast on Spotify. He absolutely loves David Hasselhoff.
Oh, jeez. The Hoff. Well.
So yeah, give it a listen. I haven't listened to it because I don't even listen to this because I can't to Dark Poutine because I don't like my voice. But give it a listen. It's just a little bit of fun.
Yeah, there you go. They can't all be winners, can they?
Hey, give it a listen, people.
Yeah, definitely do.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
In this episode of Dark Poutine, we delve into a troubling chapter of British Columbia's history that reveals the deep-seated racism and fear that plagued our past. Darcy Island, a small and isolated landmass off the coast of Vancouver Island, became the home to a leprosy colony from 1891 to 1924. But this wasn't just any colony. It was a place where Chinese immigrants who had contracted the disease were forcibly sent to live out their days in harsh and inhumane conditions, far from society's view. Leprosy, now known as Hansen's disease, has been misunderstood and deeply feared throughout history. The disease, although not highly contagious and treatable today, was seen as a mark of shame and led to the isolation of those afflicted. The establishment of the Darcy Island colony was rooted not only in fear of the disease and the diseased, but also in racist attitudes of the time, which viewed Chinese immigrants as expendable and less deserving of care. This is Dark Poutine episode 332, Out of Sight, Out of Mind, the Leprosy Colony of Darcy Island. Thanks to Yumberyard member Michelle for suggesting that this topic be covered. Leprosy, known today as Hansen's disease, is one of those illnesses that has long been shrouded in mystery, fear, and unfortunately stigma. It's an infectious disease caused by a slow-growing bacteria called Mycobacterium leprae. What makes leprosy particularly insidious is how it attacks the nerves, skin, eyes, and even the lining of the nose, leading to numbness, muscle weakness, and in severe cases, disfigurement. Imagine waking up one day and noticing a small pale patch of skin that feels numb. You might brush it off, thinking it's just a minor irritation, but this patch doesn't go away, and over time, might even spread. This is often the first sign of leprosy, a disease that has quietly affected humans for thousands of years. Leprosy's effects start subtly, but the impact becomes more pronounced as the bacteria spread. The skin, our body's first line of defense, starts to show more signs of infection. You might see more patches appearing, some red, some pale, and they often feel different from the surrounding skin, less sensitive to touch, heat, or pain. This loss of sensation is caused by the bacteria attacking the peripheral nerves that serve these areas. As the disease progresses, nerve damage can lead to more serious consequences. Imagine accidentally touching something hot and not feeling it, leading to burns or injuries that go unnoticed. Over time, repeated injuries can cause severe damage, particularly in the hands and feet. This is why you might have heard about leprosy causing disfigurement. It's not only the bacteria directly causing deformities, but rather the lack of sensation leading to repeated trauma that goes untreated. But leprosy doesn't just stop at the skin and nerves. The eyes can also be affected, leading to a loss of blinking reflexes. This might not seem like a big deal initially, but blinking is crucial for keeping our eyes moist and protected. Without it, the eyes can become dry, leading to ulcers and even blindness if not treated. In more advanced cases, the respiratory system can become involved, especially the lining of the nose. Chronic nasal congestion, nosebleeds, and even the collapse of the nasal structure can occur, further adding to the stigmatizing effects of the disease. Yikes, that's scary.
What are you doing to me here? I'm one of these people that look up stuff on WebMD and convince myself I have something, and my leg is numb right now, and while you're reading that I was thinking, maybe I have it.
Maybe you have leprosy because you've got a numb leg?
Yeah.
Well, you never know.
Gee, thanks.
You probably do.
Thank you, buddy. You always make me feel better.
Yeah, I aim to please. One of the most profound impacts of leprosy, however, is social. Throughout history, people with leprosy have often been shunned and isolated due to the visible signs of the disease and fear of contagion. The psychological toll of being ostracized can be as severe, if not more so, than the physical effects of the disease. The fear surrounding leprosy goes back eons. It's mentioned in the Bible, where it's often depicted as a divine punishment or a symbol of moral uncleanliness. In the Old Testament, those with leprosy are considered unclean and were isolated from the rest of society, forced to live outside the community in what were essentially early versions of quarantine. Leprosy wasn't just a physical ailment, it carried with it a social and spiritual stigma that isolated people in every sense of the word. Moving beyond the Bible, leprosy has a long history across various cultures. In ancient India, leprosy was known as kushta and was believed to be a result of karma from past misdeeds. The ancient Greeks and Romans also feared the disease, although their understanding of it was limited. The Greeks, for example, called it lepra, a term that referred to scaly skin, which they believed was a curse from the gods. During the Middle Ages in Europe, leprosy was rampant, and leper colonies became common. These colonies were often situated on the outskirts of towns or isolated islands, as we see here in BC with Darcy Island. Imagine living in a leprosy colony where time seemed to stand still and hope was a rare commodity. Life in one of these colonies was incredibly harsh and isolating. People who contracted leprosy, often through no fault of their own, were forcibly removed from their communities, family, and everything they knew. They were sent to live in these remote places where the outside world couldn't see them and they couldn't see the outside world. Let's say you were in a leprosy colony in medieval Europe. You'd arrive at this place with nothing but the clothes on your back, having been stripped of possessions before leaving home. As soon as you entered the colony, you'd be given a bell or a wooden clapper to carry with you wherever you went. This wasn't a kind gesture, it was to warn others of your presence so they could keep their distance, believing that even a brush with your clothing could curse them with the same disease.
They got a clapper? Clap on, clap off the clapper.
Oh dear.
So this is early quarantine, essentially, right?
Yep.
But it's quarantine as in just get them away from everybody versus let's figure out. I mean, you can kind of understand it if people didn't know back then how to treat diseases.
Right.
Right? It was sort of, well, they probably realized that if they're not near us, we won't get it. But unfortunately, a lot of other stigmas and stuff get pulled into all of this, don't they?
Well, they didn't even understand bacteria, let alone viruses at that time. So it was just like, it's the humors. Let's bleed someone's eyeballs or something like that.
Oh, gosh.
Life in leprosy colonies was bleak. The buildings were often dilapidated, more like ruins than homes. Food was scarce, and what little there was usually came from irregular charitable donations. Fresh water was hard to come by, and the sanitation was appalling, adding to the already dreadful conditions. During the day, there wasn't much to do. Most people were too weak or disfigured by the disease to work or even move around much. So you'd spend your days sitting outside in the shadows of crumbling walls, talking with others in the same miserable situation. Conversations often revolved around memories of better times when you were healthy, loved, and a part of a community. Those memories were bittersweet because you knew that life was gone forever. The colonies were worlds unto themselves, cut off from the rest of society, but weren't entirely devoid of human connection. The people within these colonies often formed tight-knit communities, bound together by their shared suffering. They cared for one another as best they could despite their limited resources. If someone fell ill beyond what the disease had already done to them, others would do what they could to nurse them back to health, or at least ease their passing. Funerals were simple, somber affairs, with those who remained silently burying their dead in makeshift graves. Religion played a significant role in these colonies. Many leprosy sufferers turned to faith as a source of comfort, attending services conducted by priests or monks who were brave or compassionate enough to enter the colonies. These religious figures would often remind the lepers that their suffering was part of God's plan and that they would find peace in the afterlife. Whether that was truly comforting is hard to say, I doubt it, but in a place where hope is scarce, any bit of solace was welcome.
Have you ever read the Bible?
Strangely enough, Matthew, yes, I have read most of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Me too. I've read it a few times.
I don't get Revelations, so it's kind of like I just kind of skip over that.
Yeah, Revelations is I force myself to read it because I'm like I can't just keep skipping to the New Testament, which is easier to read, right?
Yeah.
But Leviticus 13:2-3,
which is Old Testament.
It is Old Testament. It's the leprous person who has the disease shall wear torn clothes and let the hair of his head hang loose, and he shall cover his upper lip, I don't know why upper lip, and cry out, unclean, unclean. So essentially, the Bible itself was saying you're unclean, and they equated it to having sinned. So I just find it interesting that people who are lepers are turning to religion, which kind of started it in the first place, right? It's, but the New Testament has Jesus healing lepers all the time, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Leviticus quote goes on to say, he shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean, he shall live alone, his dwelling shall be outside the camp. Wow, so it's just like, yep, we don't want to look at you.
Sometimes I wish I could just live alone and have my dwelling outside the camp, but not in a leper colony.
Well, I kind of feel like that out here in Langley sometimes. My dwelling is outside the camp.
Out in Abbotsford, yeah.
I'm not in Abbotsford. A profound sense of abandonment and loss marked life in a leprosy colony. Yet even in such dire circumstances, the human spirit survived. People built relationships, found small joys in the mundane, and created a sense of community despite everything. In many ways, they were forgotten by the world, but they did not forget each other. The resilience of those in leper colonies is a testament to the strength of the human spirit, even in the face of unimaginable hardship. What's particularly tragic about the history of leprosy is how much of the fear surrounding it was based on misconceptions. People thought it was extremely contagious, spread by mere touch, or even by being in the same room as someone with the disease. This led to widespread discrimination, where those afflicted were often treated as less than human, banished from their homes and families, and forced to live in deplorable conditions. Despite what many people might think even today, it's not highly contagious. About 95% of people have a natural immunity to it. While seemingly remote, the resilience of those in distant leprosy colonies is echoed closer to home on Darcy Island in British Columbia. Now a protected area, this serene island once harbored a leprosy colony, revealing that such stories of isolation and survival unfolded even in our own backyard. According to a fact sheet from the BC government, one of the southern Gulf Islands, Darcy Island, is located at the southern entrance to the Salish Sea, south of Sydney Island in Harrow Strait. The island is 20 kilometers northeast of Victoria and 10 kilometers south of Sydney on the Saanich Peninsula in the Cowichan Land District. The entire island is located within the Gulf Islands National Park Reserve and is approximately 80 hectares, 200 acres, in area, with the adjacent marine waters also protected. Its native plant communities include Gary Oak and Douglas Fir Forest, alder, meadows, and coastal bluffs. The island is known for its bird populations and is a popular recreation destination. Darcy Island holds significant historical and cultural importance for the Way-Saanich First Nations. For thousands of years, it was a vital site for food harvesting and served as a sacred burial area for the Way-Saanich people. The Way-Saanich, known as the saltwater people, relied on the natural resources of the land and sea, living in harmony with the environment and following seasonal cycles of resource gathering. The Way-Saanich people had a deep spiritual connection to their land, reflected in their cultural practices and oral traditions. They viewed the land as a living entity filled with relatives in the form of plants, animals, and natural features. This worldview emphasized a responsibility to care for the land and its resources, considered gifts from the Creator. However, the arrival of European colonizers in the 19th century drastically altered the lives of the Way-Saanich people. The colonizers, seeking to expand their settlements and exploit the land's resources, began a process of dispossession and displacement of indigenous peoples. This included establishing the reserve system, which confined the Way-Saanich and other indigenous groups to small tracts of land, disrupting their traditional ways of life. Darcy Island's history darkened further in 1891 when the colonial authorities of Fort Victoria determined its use as a leprosy colony, also known as a lazaretto. Chinese immigrants suffering from leprosy were forcibly removed from Victoria and isolated on Darcy Island. This action was part of broader discriminatory practices against Chinese immigrants during that period. The establishment of the leper colony effectively stole the island from the Way-Saanich First Nation, further severing their connection to their ancestral lands. In the 1890s, Canada's response to contagious diseases like diphtheria, smallpox, tuberculosis, and, although uncommon, bubonic plague was marked by fear, stigma, and often harsh public health measures. Smallpox outbreaks prompted strict quarantines and aggressive vaccination campaigns, though not without resistance from the public. Tuberculosis, the leading cause of death, was managed through sanatoriums, but those afflicted faced significant social stigma, especially among the poor. Overall, public health efforts often prioritized containment over compassionate care. Leprosy, albeit a rare disease, caused widespread panic. In 1891, Victoria, BC, was a city where fear and prejudice often shaped public perception, especially towards Chinese immigrants. One of the most striking examples of this fear was the way the community reacted to Chinese leprosy victims. In Victoria, Chinese immigrants were often marginalized and faced significant discrimination. Many residents viewed them suspiciously, associating them with poor living conditions and exotic, disfiguring diseases. When cases of leprosy were identified among the Chinese community, this existing prejudice fueled even greater fear and paranoia. The Chinese population in Victoria was already living under challenging conditions, often confined to overcrowded and unsanitary areas like Chinatown. These environments were considered breeding grounds for disease by the wider community, reinforcing the belief that Chinese people were inherently unclean and more likely to carry infectious diseases. The local authorities and medical professionals, lacking a modern understanding of leprosy, often exaggerated the risks. They believed the disease could spread easily through casual contact, which led to the stigmatization of anyone diagnosed with leprosy. The fact that the disease was more prevalent among the Chinese due to the cramped living conditions and limited access to health care only intensified the fears. The combination of racial prejudice and fear of the unknown made Chinese leprosy victims in Victoria the subject of extreme discrimination.
Quelle surprise!
Yeah.
It's people jump on this bandwagon of a disease being from the other who is responsible for it all the time, all through history, right?
The Spanish flu, which actually wasn't a Spanish flu.
Right. The coronavirus, the quote, China virus.
Yes, China.
Right. And AIDS, AIDS was considered like just for gays, right? And that whole bullcrap about patient zero and trying to find somebody to blame.
Yeah.
It's just horrible what we do as human beings. There's a disease that hurts people and we all jump on. It's victim blaming in a way, right?
In a way, and it's also pointing fingers. It's like, pointing fingers away from ourselves.
That way we feel cleaner, right?
Right, exactly. Well, it's not our virus. Yeah. It started in Wuhan, China is where it came from. Yeah, so ridiculous. Blah, 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 blah.
You know what? As soon as you have it, it's your virus, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. We've both had it. It's nasty.
I don't like it, Mike.
The Darcy Island leprosy colony was established in 1891 by the Municipal Council of Victoria, British Columbia, in response to the discovery of 5 Chinese individuals with leprosy living in a shack in Chinatown. After the discovery of the leprosy sufferers, a guard was stationed at the house on Fiskard Street where they had been living. One of the men, distraught at his captivity, attempted to die by suicide. From the Times columnist Stephen Rotan in 2012, the city councilors knew leprosy would frighten the public, so they had to act. The first thing they did was to request from the provincial government the use of Darcy Island. On April 22, 1891, this was granted. A few days later, it was reported in a local paper that it would be useful for a garbage crematory. Obviously, the council was trying to avoid panic, but soon the truth was out. On May 5th, there was an article in a local paper about the proposed colony. By then, preparations were in full gear. On May 13th, men and materials were taken to the island to construct the necessary buildings. These had already been designed by architect John Teague. On May 20th, everything had been prepared, and the lepers were ready to be sent. To judge from the local newspaper, the citizens approved. The headline in the Daily Colonist on May 21, 1891 reads, "Effectual measures taken to prevent leprosy becoming rooted in Chinatown," and goes on to say, "The 5 lepers of Victoria will be properly isolated." The lepers themselves are horrifyingly depicted. More repulsive human beings would be hard to imagine. Each was a total physical wreck, and their features were so distorted, disfigured, and swollen as to be almost out of human semblance. The article goes on to describe the excellent facilities that have been created for the victims, and finishes with saying that the city authorities will visit the lepers periodically and see that their wants are supplied. The men did not want to leave their home in Victoria and had to be taken by force into quarantine on Darcy Island. Darcy Island is located in the Harrow Strait off the east coast of Vancouver Island. The island's isolation, surrounded by cold and strong currents, made it a suitable location for a quarantine facility. The conditions on the island were dire and inhumane. The colony was not staffed with medical personnel, and the residents, primarily Chinese immigrants, were left to care for themselves with minimal supplies. Food and other essentials, which included coffins and opium, were delivered infrequently, and the inhabitants were essentially left to die on the island. More after a quick break. And we are back. Matthew, thoughts so far?
It's something that struck me there in the last part
Sure.
when you talked about coffins and opium as being sort of essential things delivered for the
Yep.
inhabitants.
Yep.
And I was sitting there thinking, why opium? And then I honestly, Mike, quite frankly, if I was shoved onto an island like that with absolutely no hope, little bit of opium just might be what I need to just obliterate my mind for the rest of my short life.
Yep.
Those poor people. Horrible. Horrible.
Yeah. Between 1891 and 1924, 49 men lived in isolation at the Darcy Island Lazaretto. With only one exception, 48 of these residents were of Chinese descent. For 33 long years, these men endured harsh conditions, largely cut off from the outside world. Life on Darcy Island was incredibly tough. The residents were visited by a supply ship with a doctor only once every 3 months. They were left to survive on their own, forced to clear land and cultivate a garden about an acre in size to sustain themselves. Despite these challenges, the men formed a cultural organization to support and care for each other. As if life wasn't hard enough on the island, tragedy struck in the early morning hours of June 15, 1899. Fire swept through the colony, destroying 7 of the 16 shacks and killing 2 of the colony's inhabitants, unable to escape the flames. The survivors of the burned shacks, some injured, crowded into the remaining shacks for shelter. The other colony members quickly buried the dead. The provincial medical health officer, listed in the news as Dr. R.L. Fraser, attended the island a week later to determine what had occurred. The fire had been caused by the occupant of one of the hovels who tipped over an oil lamp but was too feeble to extinguish the blaze before it spread. Fraser wrote that the colony was in a truly deplorable condition, and its inhabitants received no medical treatment, medicine, or nursing. He also noted that few colony members could work, and the rest were seriously debilitated. According to a province news article printed on June 29, 1899, quote, "A lengthened description of the condition of the lepers on Darcy Island is given by Dr. Hall and John Nelson as follows. Every development and every type of this loathsome disease is apparent in the little group before us. The spokesman, a strong-framed man, betrays by the incessant twitching of the muscles of the face that the disease has attacked the nervous centers, accompanying which are nameless pricking, burning, and jerking features of this sensitive type of the plague. Gradually, the sensory disturbance of the skin and the painful swellings of the nerves will decline, and the victim relapse into an anesthetic state which precedes the fall of the curtain on this dismal stage of life. Another has the tuberculated form. The upper lips are distorted, the eyes are bleared, and the ears enlarged and the limbs swollen, finally to end in breakdown before death permits the scarred body to be covered by parent dust. The most hideous form was that of one where the face had become a great mass of cruel, half-healed sores, most revolting to behold. The countenance, never very prepossessing, was rendered perfectly loathsome by the disfigurement of disease. The lassitude and depression, mental and physical, which is the first symptom of the disease, unnerves as the dissemination of the virus extends throughout the body until there is neither volition nor vitality left to carry them from place to place. When this stage is reached, the end is near, and each dwells in his own cabin. To the spectator, the only distinction between them is in the different degrees of unsightly deformity and squalor which they exhibit. Sightless and sunken eyeballs hid behind ulcerated lids, crippled and fingerless hands with difficulty adjust the clothing, which conceals emaciated forms, while huge crusts of dried exudation cover wide areas of indolent inflammation. Their footwear is confined almost exclusively to overshoes, as many of them have lost some of their toes, and their feet are too painful to enclose in shoes." End quote. The article closes with a call for the Dominion Government of Canada to step in and deal with conditions on Darcy. It would be another 7 years of hell before that happened.
You know, Mike, I'm really surprised that the province, the newspaper, took the stance of calling for help.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was doing the episode on the Chinese Exclusion Act and head tax.
Yeah.
There were some horribly racist headlines out of that newspaper at the time.
Well, there still are in around this particular thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, the context is, it's racist, but it's what was accepted language at the time, calling, these people by a race and all that kind of stuff. They're human beings. They're just people. They're just people who are suffering from leprosy.
I don't understand why people just can't go, these are all people.
Right.
Right?
Oh, boy. In the meantime, men suffering from leprosy feared the fate of living on Darcy so much that one man took to hiding from authorities by living in a large cedar stump just outside New Westminster. An article from the Aurora Banner on January 26, 1906, described the man's conditions. Quote, "The provincial police discovered him in his forest abode on Wednesday. He had an umbrella over the top of the tree stump in order to keep out the rain, and except that his home was a little damp, he was quite comfortable. The man's mother and brother are known to have had leprosy, and this led the other Chinese to watch him. When signs of the disease appeared on him, he fled from his companions lest they give him up to the police. After his capture, the officers destroyed the stump, the blankets, and other effects that the man had in his woodland residence, and he will be taken to the lazaretto shortly." End quote. With the passage of the Leprosy Act in 1906, the federal government took over the colony's operations from the municipal authorities. This change in administration transformed Darcy Island into a more humane medical facility. The new policy focused on repatriating the residents back to China whenever possible. Of course, again, out of sight, out of mind. In 1907, some residents were sent back to China, with some placed with the Presbyterian mission to lepers in Canton, while others returned to their extended families. The federal takeover also improved living conditions on the island. New buildings were constructed, and the colony was equipped to handle new cases of leprosy. The remaining residents were provided with a caretaker, a Chinese interpreter, and necessary medical supplies to alleviate their suffering. This shifted from the previous neglectful approach to a more supportive and medically oriented environment. Canada had several leprosy colonies besides Darcy Island, each with its own story. The Tracadie leper colony in the small town of Tracadie, New Brunswick, is another significant but often overlooked chapter in Canadian history. Its story begins in the early 19th century. The first recorded case of leprosy in the area appeared around 1815, but it still wasn't until the 1840s that the disease spread more noticeably within the local population, particularly among the Acadian and Irish communities. The growing number of cases alarmed the public and the authorities, prompting a response that would have lasting implications.
And you know what I'm seeing here, Mike? It's poverty, not race, where these diseases are jumping in.
So again, it's class instead of race.
And the thing is, it was poverty that was inflicted intentionally by the ruling class, like the Acadians and the Irish. So that's just. Have we ever done an episode about the Acadians?
No, I want to do one on the expulsion of the Acadians, actually.
That could be really interesting, right? Because between like August of 1755 and 1763, 1,800 British soldiers crisscrossed what's now Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island to capture Acadians, seize their lands, their livestock, burn down their houses.
Yeah. So
you're creating, and here in BC, we sort of shoved Chinese people away and didn't let them earn a living. So, I say we, it was our ancestors, right? The ruling class created the poverty,
right.
And then surprise, disease happens. Those people. Well, you actually created the situation for the disease to run rampant.
Well, yeah, there's also, we see a disease running rampant down in the downtown east side right now, which is poverty and addiction. So, yep. And that's created, again, by society.
It's not just downtown east side. I can look out my window right now.
Right. So in 1849, the government of New Brunswick officially established the Tracadie leper colony. The colony was created as a quarantine site where individuals diagnosed with leprosy could be isolated from the rest of society. This move was driven by fear and lack of understanding about the disease's transmission, as is usual, which was believed to be highly contagious at the time. Patients were often sent to the colony involuntarily, separated from their families and communities, and forced to live in conditions that were, by modern standards, extremely harsh. The colony was initially a collection of rudimentary buildings offering little comfort or medical care. However, in 1868, the religious hospitaliers of St. Joseph, a Catholic order of nuns, took over the colony's management. These nuns played a crucial role in improving conditions and care for the patients. They provided not only medical treatment, as far as was possible at the time, but again also spiritual and emotional support. The nuns' dedication brought some dignity to the patients' lives, though the colony remained a place of isolation and suffering. Life in the colony was extremely challenging. Patients lived in close quarters with limited access to the outside world, as it was in all leper colonies. The physical symptoms of leprosy were compounded by the psychological toll of being cut off from family and society. Despite these hardships, again, a sense of community developed among residents over time. They supported one another, sharing their burdens and forming bonds that helped them endure difficult circumstances. Again, the resilience of humanity in really tough circumstances.
Okay, this is just a joke, but it just, I'm with the state of the healthcare system these days.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, if you've been into emergency lately, with dirty war zone sort of emergency rooms, it's just, that was horrible. And I think it just goes to show that, our system, our healthcare system really is collapsing right now. And I don't think people realize, I'm having some problems. My mom's having some problems, takes a long time. But if it collapses even more, we're going to start having some major issues, right?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, we're already seeing people wait for treatments that could be life-saving. So,
Mike, somebody said to me, "Why don't you go to emergency this week?" When my back hurt and I couldn't feel my leg.
Yeah,
and I literally said to them, I don't want to sit in a room for 12 hours with people literally smoking crack and shooting up beside me, right? Yeah. To be given a Tylenol and sent home.
It depends on where you go.
You know where I am, so
yeah. If you go to St. Paul's, that's what you're going to see.
Then that's where I'd go because that's my local. Yeah.
The Tracadie leper colony continued to operate through the late 19th and early 20th centuries, even as medical understanding of leprosy improved. As time went on and medical science advanced, we began to understand more about leprosy. By the late 19th century, the Norwegian scientist Gerhard Armauer Hansen discovered the bacteria that causes the disease, which is now why it's called Hansen's disease. This discovery was a turning point as it started to shift the perception of leprosy from a divine curse or a result of moral failings to a medical condition that could be studied and treated.
It took so long.
Thousands of years. Yeah.
So long, Mike. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it was a biblical disease, so it was, if it's Old Testament disease, we just figured it out in the 19th century.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gerhard.
Right? Yep. Mr. Hansen, hats off to you.
Wonder if Jim Hansen's related to him.
No, it's Hansen, not Hansen.
That's Hansen. That's sort of like Henry Campbell and Henry Cavill.
I swear you said Henry Campbell the first time.
I think that's so classic. I think we should do a search for listeners who know somebody named Henry Campbell who's as
we should just
Campbell.
Find a random Henry Campbell online and put his face on a t-shirt. It's hotter than Henry Campbell in here. By the early 20th century, advances in medical science began to offer new hope. The discovery of treatments like chalmugra oil and later the advent of antibiotics gradually turned leprosy from a death sentence into a manageable condition. As these treatments became more widely available, the need for leper colonies diminished. In 1965, after more than a century of operation, the Tracadie leper colony was officially closed. The The remaining patients were either cured and reintegrated into society or transferred to other medical facilities. Today, the site of the former colony is a place of reflection and memory. The hospital building has been preserved as a museum where visitors can learn about the colony's history and the experiences of those who lived there. The story of the Tracadie leper colony serves as a reminder of the challenges faced by those with leprosy, the impact of fear and misunderstanding in medical history, and the compassion shown by those who cared for the sick in the most trying circumstances. Before Tracadie, though, there was Sheldrake Island, also in New Brunswick. In the 1840s, people with leprosy were sent to this remote island in the Miramichi River. Conditions were tough, and they were moved to Tracadie after the colony was established there. Another small, less formal colony existed on Little Bay Islands in Newfoundland during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It wasn't as well known or as large as the others, but it served the same purpose, isolating those with leprosy in a remote place. These colonies reflected the times when isolating people with a contagious disease was seen as the best solution. The remote locations also speak to the fear and stigma that surrounded leprosy during that period. The lazaretto on Darcy Island was closed in 1924, and the remaining patients were moved to Bentic Island, which continued to operate until 1957. The row houses on Darcy Island, which had housed the lepers, were deliberately burnt by the government in 1960, shortly before the island was designated as a park. This act was part of an effort to erase the physical remnants of the colony, which had become a symbol of shameful treatment and neglect. Efforts have been made to memorialize Darcy Island's tragic history. In 1967, the island was designated a Class A marine park, and a plaque was placed on the island by the mayor of Victoria, Alan Lowe, to commemorate those who suffered and died there. This commemoration serves as a reminder of the injustices faced by the lepers and the need to remember and learn from past mistakes. The history of Darcy Island is a poignant reminder of the impact of discrimination and the importance of acknowledging and preserving the memory of those who suffered under such conditions. According to the World Health Organization, WHO, leprosy is still present in over 120 countries, with more than 200,000 new cases reported yearly. While global efforts have reduced its prevalence, countries like Brazil, India, and Indonesia continue to report significant numbers of new cases. Transmission occurs through droplets from the nose and mouth, but requires prolonged, close contact to contract the disease. Casual interactions like shaking hands or sharing a meal don't spread leprosy, and once treatment begins, the person is no longer contagious. Diagnosing leprosy usually involves identifying specific skin lesions or nerve damage. Cases are classified into two types of treatment: paucibacillary (PB) with fewer lesions, and multibacillary (MB) with more extensive involvement. Treatment involves a combination of 3 drugs over 6 to 12 months, depending on the severity. Prevention efforts focus on early detection and treatment, but to interrupt transmission more effectively, WHO recommends preventative chemotherapy for those in close contact with patients. The WHO supports global leprosy control by providing technical guidance and compiling data. They have set an ambitious strategy for 2021 to 2030, aiming for 0 new cases, disabilities, and stigma associated with leprosy. This strategy includes developing country-specific plans, enhancing prevention, managing complications, and addressing stigma through education and human rights initiatives. The WHO also offers e-learning modules to train health workers on these topics. However, old fears die hard. Even today, in some parts of the world, people with leprosy still face significant social stigma and discrimination, even though the disease is now treatable with antibiotics. The fear that once led to creating places like Darcy Island lingers differently, manifesting how societies react to new and unfamiliar diseases. Whether it's HIV/AIDS in the 1980s or more recent pandemics like COVID-19, the combination of fear and misunderstanding continues to shape our responses to illness. And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 332, Out of Sight, Out of Mind. the leprosy colony of Darcy Island. That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week. All right, here's our first voicemail.
Hi, Mike and Matthew. It's your blue noser friend, Colin. I'm just getting caught up on all the episodes, and I just listened to the Shara family murders, and I just wanted to say I'm really glad you guys covered this case. I remember when it happened and how horrified I was at the time that something like this could happen in Canada with our so-called laws and protections. And I just got to say, Mike and Matthew, but especially Matthew, I agree with you 100%. There should be a very detailed background check on people who want to come to Canada. And I don't say that to be a bigot or to be racist or anything like that, because I believe in all cultures and backgrounds and religions. I don't care. You want to come to Canada, we'll embrace you. I have lots of friends from different backgrounds, and I think it just adds to Canada's beauty as a whole. However, that being said, if you cannot follow Canadian laws and Canadian society, and you isolate yourself from Canadian society, to me, that's not okay. And I think anybody that has an opinion that women are second-class citizens, that people that are, LGBTQ should be, second-class citizens, or they should be killed or whatever, you're not welcome here. And I don't think it's right, some of the things that are happening right now in Canada that's being allowed to happen. It's ridiculous. We have Jewish Canadians that have been here for generations who are terrified, and our government is doing nothing about it. The Palestinian protests, I'll say it, in Halifax interrupted the gay pride parade on Halifax. In Halifax. That was, I don't know if you guys knew about that, but I was pissed, just to put it bluntly. You know what? We all have a right to protest in Canada. I don't care what it's about. But, when you start becoming disrespectful of other people's beliefs and cultures, that is what make Canada, it's not okay. And you don't get to make people scared for their lives and to live in Canada. So, yeah, I agree. We need reform. And I got no problem with people coming to Canada. But our system needs to be able to support it. We need to be able to provide the programs that people need to live. And people need to want to be to Canada, to contribute to Canada, and to follow our laws. And that's just how it should be. And, I just don't have no time for violence against women or any minority, anything. I just don't. So, anyways, I'm glad you guys covered this episode, and hope to hear more like it in the future. You guys have a good day, and the lobster didn't shit in the pot, but maybe I'll get you guys some boiled. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you, my favorite blue noser.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike,
wait.
Hey, Mike, when my husband got his Canadian citizenship and the ceremony, there was a video playing on the screen in front of everyone who's about to become a Canadian citizen. Mm-hmm. And I watched it, and interesting, they showed businesswomen. They showed a gay couple getting married. Right. They showed all kinds of races. They showed children playing together. Yeah. And I thought that is a very thought through video to be showing people who are becoming Canadian. I thought it was quite lovely. It actually got to me,
Yeah. Well, she made some good points. I know people who are really afraid right now, hearing some really crazy rhetoric that frankly isn't true. So anyway, I've had to unfriend a lot of people, let's just say, over this.
Don't get me started.
But we'll do an episode on that eventually. We'll see.
We will.
Yeah. Let's move on to another voicemail.
Hi, Mike and Matthew. My name is Heather, Matthew probably knows me from the barnyard as a fellow bulldog parent of Dusty and formerly Lana, who has passed away. And Mike, although I'm not from Bridgewater, nor am I a family member or personal friend, I am from Guelph, and I know your dad went here for vet school. So hopefully that brings a smile to your face. I wanted to call and say thank you so much for doing the episode on the British home children. I apologize for being a bit belated in calling you. I remember I phoned in previously to suggest it because my grandfather was one, and I was so pleased to see it come up on your episode list, and I was just really blown away by all the information you provided. My grandfather was very lucky and had a really good experience with his placement family, and they ended up being friends for their whole life. However, most of his trauma actually came from his treatment in England. He was separated from his siblings. Some of them he never saw or heard from again, and he was never really okay with talking about what happened before he was sent here to Canada. And you shed some light on what his experience may have been like. And, you know, he's been gone a long time now, and we never got to ask him. And I just found it such an interesting and rewarding episode, even though it was such a dark topic. So thank you so much for doing that. I'm going to go send you some donut money now, so I don't need a double shout out. But Matthew, I sure could use a new job. Go poop in your tooth. Thanks.
So what's her new job then?
Well,
Matthew?
you know what? I want to say, she just reminded me and made me realize that I miss seeing pictures of Alana, her bulldog. So I'm going to ask her to post one and tag me just so I can see another picture of Lana again, because Lana was like a girl Steve.
No.
So the job is bulldog rescue.
Oh, well, there you go.
She runs a Guelph bulldog rescue, and because vets train in Guelph, I think the statistic is 99.8% of all vets have trained in Guelph. It's a good place to have a rescue because they give services for free.
Well, there you go.
Please don't check that statistic, everyone. Just trust me.
Yeah. So, Matthew, somebody in the Umberyard just now posted a thing. Sir Henry Campbell dash Bannerman. So Sir Henry Campbell was a political leader in, he was the first man to be given official use of the title Prime Minister in the UK, in Britain.
Okay, yeah, no, he's not nearly as hot as Henry Cavill.
Yeah, but I think we should put Henry Campbell on a T-shirt. I really do. It's hotter than
Henry Campbell. Let's do it.
Yeah. I like this quote by him. It says, "Personally, I am an immense believer in bed and constantly keeping horizontal. The heart and everything else goes slower, and the whole system is refreshed."
I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, I'm into Henry Campbell.
You know what I got delivered today?
What's that?
Wrist and ankle weights.
Wrist and ankle weights.
Yeah.
Why do you need those?
My hubby told me I need to walk more and I need wrist and ankle weights. So as I get older, I build up my muscle tone. So if I ever fall over, I've fallen and I can't get up woman on TV.
You need one of those little necklaces with the button. My grandmother had one of those.
Aw.
Yeah.
As I get older and older, I understand that woman's plight.
Yeah, right? I do too. The older I get, the more noise I make when I get up out of bed or off the chair.
Yeah, I'm like, whenever I get out of the chair, I'm like, I'm making my grandpa's noises. He used to do it.
Exactly. Well, here's a third voicemail.
Hey, Mike and Matthew. It's Trish from Connecticut. Really liked the story of the attack on Pelosi. Yeah. I think it's called charter rights in Canada, isn't that? Yeah. Here's an American who knows about charter rights. Yeah. And Matthew, the Canadian Supreme Court, you have to retire at 75. What a crazy idea. What? Yeah. And Mike, for a future episode, maybe you could do James Earl Ray. He was in Canada twice. The first time after he escaped from prison in Missouri, and then after he shot and killed Dr. King, and it was so easy for him to get a Canadian passport. Something to think about. Take care, you two. Bye.
Well, I didn't know that about James Earl Ray, but now you can count on an episode because, wow, that's interesting.
We're not talking about James Earl Jones, are we?
No.
Okay.
The guy who shot Martin Luther King Jr.
Okay. Didn't know his name.
Yeah, James Earl Ray.
Actually, I have a blank spot there. I didn't know they actually knew who did it.
What?
I didn't know they knew who did it.
Wow. Interesting.
That's bad. I feel bad.
That is really bad. But
Gosh.
You know what? Okay, so I will work on an episode just to help you become more informed, Matthew.
Thank you, Trish from Connecticut.
Connecticut.
I like Connecticut.
Mom and Dad have been there a few times, but I have not.
It's lovely.
Personally been there.
Quite tranquil, yeah.
Yeah, I like New England in general, so yeah. Have you ever been to Rhode Island?
No, Connecticut is sort of like Rhode Island, but heading way more towards New York.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Right. I picture it like it's like Rhode Island on steroids.
Well, there you go.
I could be totally wrong because I've never been to Rhode Island.
Well, what do you think she does there in Connecticut, Matthew?
What does she do? I think that she owns a gin distillery.
A gin distillery?
Yeah. She's a master distiller.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, it's I'm friends with one of the world's world's oldest master distiller of gin.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he's I met him when I used to work on Beefeater. He's the longest running master distiller of gin.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, enjoy your distillery in Connecticut. We've got one more voicemail here.
Hi, Mike and Matthew. This is Sam calling from Ontario, a longtime listener, probably about 5 years or so, second-time caller. I have a bit of a bittersweet story. I promised I wouldn't call until after I got caught up because I had gotten behind on a bunch of episodes. So in June, I was starting to get caught up on the episodes, and normally I listen to your podcast in my car, but I was listening to it home on speakerphone on my phone. Also, sorry, I have a bit of a cold. That's why I sound a little bit raspy. Anyway, sorry. I was listening to the podcast on my phone, and when I get really heated listening to it, I often will kind of talk at the phone and be like, "Oh, Mike, oh, Matthew," or whatnot. And my cat Treble, he had this thing that if I was on the phone with anyone, he had to be acknowledged. So, if I were on speakerphone with a friend or whatnot, if he heard someone else's voice, he would meow so loudly until someone would actually acknowledge him. So they would say, "Oh, hi, Treble, hi, Treble," and then he would stop meowing, absolutely stop meowing. But because I was kind of talking to you guys while listening, he would meow so loudly because he expected that it was actually someone else on the other line, and that you guys were going to say hi to him. And so I was originally going to call and say, "Hey guys, please say hi to Treble." Unfortunately, a few weeks after that, he did pass away. But anyways, I still think it's a funny story. And I wanted to let you guys know that even my cat loved Dark Poutine. Anyways, thanks for everything you guys do. I really appreciate everything. Go take a shit in your hat. Bye.
Well, there you have it.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Sorry, your kitty, but I'm glad your kitty got to listen.
What does Sam do for work, Matthew?
Sam owns the Samsonite luggage company.
Samsonite. Oh, I gotcha. I'm picking up what you're putting down, Matthew. Well, there you go. Was she responsible for that gorilla jumping all over the luggage, or yeah, oh yeah?
She hired an ad agency. What did you just say? I'm picking up what you're putting down?
Yep.
I've never heard that before.
Oh, really?
Oh.
I've said that a couple of times today. I said that to my doctor today. Because he said, do you understand what I'm saying? And I was like, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Oh, no. When the doctor says, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. It usually means you're doing something wrong.
It means he's scolding you for doing.
No, he wasn't like that. He's
Okay,
not
good.
like that. No. He just wanted to make sure that I understood, because I'm dumb. So
yeah, you're so stupid.
yeah. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. All right, we're on to Donut Money donors and Patreon this week, and it looks like, interestingly, somebody joined and then unjoined. So, well, there you go. That's nice of you. Next, we have a Sarah Wood.
Sarah!
And Sarah doesn't say where she's from. So let's find out where Sarah's from and what she does.
Sarah?
Yep.
Yeah, is from, what's that city just at the end of California near the Mexican border?
The city just it's oh my gosh, I don't know. San Diego.
San Diego. She's in San Diego.
Oh, okay. And what does she do there in San Diego? She
is the manager, or if you're in the UK, manageress of. There's a really old school, beautiful hotel on the water there, and I'm just picturing her running the show there.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's kind of a high end hotel, sort of. I think it's white with like. I went there once. I can't remember the name, but yeah, I want to go to San Diego. Yeah,
San Diego's nice. I've been there. I had a really nice steak in the Gaslight District there.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was very good. The business.
Did you go there with Banoffee?
No, I did not. No. She's in LA, so that's a bit of a drive.
Okay.
But no, I've been there before a long time ago. I went to the How Design Conference there in 2004, I believe. So quite some time ago.
How Design?
How Design, yes.
Okay.
It used to be a magazine. I don't recall if it is or isn't anymore, but it was a big conference. Anyway, it was fun. So there you go. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for doing what you do and for becoming a patron. And we do have, she's already mentioned that she did send us some donut money. Heather Dresser sent us some donut money. I just want to read what she said. She says she doesn't want a double shout out, but we're giving you one anyway. Please buy some treats for both of you and the fur babies too. Thanks for always making my week. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
That's very nice.
Post some old Lana pics for me.
Yes, exactly. We'd love to see those. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my book, Murder, Madness, and Mayhem, is available to order via a link on the Dark Poutine website. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, please check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you took the time to give Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening, and tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that is it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Because there's enough of those already.
Certainly is.